For me, Sinner, as far as controlling the middle of the court. So you serve first ball, you return deep.
Carlos Alcaraz, a win in just 50 minutes.
The rivalry did not beat Carlos Alcaraz. His own body may have done it first. At 23, Alcaraz should be trading brutal forehands with Jannik Sinner. Instead, a wrist injury has kept him away while his greatest rival raced ahead. One man kept lifting trophies, the other watched from the sidelines. Tennis called this rivalry the future. Right now, it feels painfully unfinished. Is Sinner pushing Alcaraz toward greatness, or has their endless battle already started breaking him? The irony is savage. Carlos finally found the perfect rival, then lost the one weapon needed to fight him. Even the tennis gods apparently enjoy dark comedy. Subscribe right now, because we are uncovering how Alcaraz's rivalry with Sinner turned from a gift into a heartbreaking nightmare. To understand why this hurts, go back to Paris in 2021. Alcaraz was still a teenager with raw speed, fearless shot-making, and the subtle court manners of a fire alarm. Sinner was already inside the top 10. Their first official meeting did not look like the start of a friendly little contest. It felt like two players recognizing a future problem across the net. Sinner won that day in straight sets. Yet the score barely mattered. Both men could take the ball early, change direction without warning, and turn defense into attack before the crowd had finished gasping. Tennis had found two young stars who refused to wait politely for the old guard to leave. Their next major clash came at Wimbledon in 2022. Sinner won again, using his flat ground strokes to rush Alcaraz on grass. Carlos looked dangerous, but Jannik looked ready. A few weeks later, Alcaraz answered in Umag. That final went to Sinner, however, and suddenly the Italian held a clear early advantage. Then New York changed everything. Their 2022 US Open quarterfinal lasted 5 hours and 15 minutes and finished at 2:50 in the morning. Sinner held a match point in the fourth set. Alcaraz saved it, dragged the contest into a fifth, and eventually won. He later lifted the trophy and became the youngest man to reach world number 1. Picture what that defeat did to Sinner. He was 1 point away from removing the future champion. Instead, Carlos escaped, claimed his first major, and left Jannik with a memory that could wake a player at 3 in the morning even when no match is scheduled. That night created the basic rule of this rivalry. Being ahead means almost nothing. Match point can become regret. Confidence can disappear within 2 rallies. A safe lead is about as real as a quiet tennis parent during a deciding tiebreak. Alcaraz gained belief from New York, while Sinner gained a target. Their careers became linked after that. Every draw produced the same question. When could they meet? Which surface favored whom? Who had improved since the last battle? During 2023, the balance kept shifting. Alcaraz beat Sinner in the Indian Wells semifinal. Jannik responded in Miami after a stunning contest filled with brutal baseline exchanges and impossible movement. Sinner also defeated him in Beijing later that year. Each result seemed to answer one question while creating 3 more. Yet something more serious was developing underneath the highlights. They were not merely fighting for trophies. Each man became the measuring stick for the other. A normal victory could build ranking points. Beating this rival could reshape confidence. Alcaraz admitted that facing Sinner forced him to suffer. He also said those matches showed him how to become a better player. Jannik expressed a similar view, describing Carlos as a reference point for his work. Respectful words, yes. Comfortable words, absolutely not. Here is where this story turns harsh. Alcaraz did not just have to beat Sinner. He had to keep rebuilding himself because Sinner never stopped improving. Jannik strengthened his serve, became more secure at the net, and learned to control points without rushing. Carlos kept adding variety, improving his backhand, and finding new ways to attack. Their rivalry became an arms race with rackets, data, and very expensive coaching boxes. In 2024, Alcaraz began gaining the upper hand. He ended Sinner's unbeaten start to the season at Indian Wells. Later, Carlos defeated him across 5 sets in the Roland Garros semi-final, despite both arriving in Paris with injury concerns. Alcaraz then won the title. The Spaniard beat Sinner again in the Beijing final after a deciding set tiebreak. Carlos had found a pattern. His variety could disturb Jannik's clean rhythm, while his defense forced the Italian to hit extra shots. More importantly, Alcaraz seemed to enjoy the disorder. Sinner prefers to build pressure through clean, repeated force. Carlos can turn a rally into street theater. A drop shot appears, then comes a lob. Next, he produces a forehand from somewhere near the advertising boards. Tactical planning suddenly needs a seatbelt. Still, Jannik kept winning almost everywhere else. His consistency pushed him to number 1 and major titles. This created a strange contrast. Alcaraz could trouble Sinner directly, but Sinner was often better at crushing the rest of the field week after week. The rivalry reached another level in 2025. Alcaraz defeated Sinner in the Rome final. Then they met for the Roland Garros Championship in Paris, where the drama became almost unreasonable. Sinner took the first 2 sets. He later held 3 championship points. One clean finish would have given him the trophy and delivered a crushing statement against the opponent who had recently controlled their matchup. Carlos refused to disappear. He saved those match points, forced a 5th set, and won after 5 hours and 29 minutes. It was the longest Roland Garros final on record. Alcaraz called it a privilege to make history with Sinner. Beautiful sportsmanship, certainly. For Jannik, though, history arrived carrying a hammer. Think about the emotional cruelty. Sinner had done almost everything required. He led by 2 sets. He reached championship point 3 times. Yet the trophy went to the man across the net. Tennis does not award partial credit for nearly surviving Carlos Alcaraz. That defeat could have broken Jannik's confidence. Instead, he answered at Wimbledon. Sinner beat Alcaraz in 4 sets in the final, ended a 5-match losing streak against him, and stopped Carlos from winning a 3rd straight Wimbledon crown. The response was ruthless. Paris belonged to Carlos. London belonged to Jannik. Their rivalry now controlled the biggest stages, and the sport finally had the post-Big 3 story it desperately wanted. Alcaraz praised the matchup as something special. Sinner acknowledged how difficult it was to keep facing him. Their respect remained clear, but nobody should confuse respect with softness. Friends do not spend 4 hours testing each other's lungs under global floodlights for a silver cup. By the end of 2025, they had divided the season's 4 major titles between them and met in 3 consecutive Grand Slam finals. Alcaraz won Roland Garros and the US Open. Sinner took Wimbledon. The rivalry was no longer potential. It was the center of men's tennis. Then 2026 delivered the cruel twist. Carlos began brilliantly by winning the Australian Open and completing the career Grand Slam. At 22, he became the youngest man to collect all 4 major singles titles. That should have opened a glorious year. Instead, his right wrist began changing the entire picture. Alcaraz has not competed since Barcelona in April. The injury forced him out of major events, including Roland Garros and Wimbledon. For a player whose game depends on explosive acceleration, violent forehand speed, soft touch, and sudden changes of direction, the wrist is not a minor office complaint. It is connected to nearly every weapon. While Carlos recovered, Sinner kept moving. The Italian gathered huge titles and ranking points. He drew level with Alcaraz in the race for the sport's biggest trophies, then continued building momentum during the Spaniard's absence. That is the tragedy hidden inside the ranking table. Carlos was not losing to Jannik across the net. He was losing opportunities without walking onto the court. There was no handshake, no final set fight, and no chance to change tactics, only withdrawals and waiting. Every week Alcaraz missed gave Sinner something more valuable than one victory: uncontested space. Ranking points expire, trophies shape belief, repeated success creates authority inside a locker room. When the top rival is absent, the player still competing can strengthen his position without answering the matchup that once troubled him most. Does that make Sinner's success less valid? Of course not. Jannik did his job. He entered tournaments, handled opponents, and won. Blaming him would be like blaming the scoreboard for displaying the score. However, the emotional effect on Alcaraz must be enormous. An injured champion does not stop thinking like a champion. He watches results, he studies matches, he sees the rival improving. Rehab may strengthen tissue, but it does not freeze the tour. Imagine Carlos sitting at home while Wimbledon begins without him. That tournament gave him 2 of his most famous titles. Center court had become part of his identity. Yet Sinner arrived as the leading force and left with another major crown. The public sees trophies and smiles. Behind those images sit long treatment sessions, careful hitting tests, and the fear of one painful swing restarting the whole process. Come back early, and the injury may return. Wait longer, and Sinner gains even more ground. What a lovely choice. Tennis truly knows how to offer two doors marked danger. Questions also grow because wrist injuries can be complicated. Timing matters, confidence in the stroke matters. A player may be medically cleared yet still hesitate on a full power forehand. At this level, a tiny hesitation becomes an invitation. Alcaraz's team has protected details about his recovery, which is understandable. Opponents do not need a medical map of the exact shot that hurts. Yet limited information creates noise. Fans speculate, former players raise concerns, every practice clip becomes evidence in an online courtroom with no qualified judge. Now even Sinner has faced his own physical setback. A right knee issue forced him out of Cincinnati after he had already skipped Canada. Suddenly, the two men expected to carry tennis into its next era are both trying to reach the US Open through medical uncertainty. That changes the story again. The tragedy is not simply Carlos watching Jannik escape, it is the possibility that this magnificent rivalry could lose precious chapters because elite tennis keeps demanding more from young bodies than those bodies can safely provide. The ATP calendar offers little mercy. Hard courts lead to clay. Clay quickly gives way to grass. Then players fly back toward North American hard courts. Deep runs mean more matches, more travel, and less recovery. Success earns trophies, cash, and the exciting prize of additional physical punishment. Alcaraz and Sinner are especially vulnerable because they reach late rounds so often. A lower-ranked player may lose early and gain several days to reset. The champions keep playing until Sunday, then move to another city and begin again. Dominance sounds glamorous until you inspect the mileage. Some people will say they are young, rich, and supported by excellent teams. All true, none of it makes tendons invincible. Money can buy the best scan. It cannot negotiate with human tissue. The rivalry itself also raises the physical price. Their rallies demand extreme speed and balance. Both defend far beyond normal positions, then strike with attacking force. Matches stretch because neither man accepts a lost point until the ball bounces twice. So ask the uncomfortable question, are we watching the start of a legendary rivalry, or are we consuming it faster than it can survive? There is still hope. Alcaraz is only 23. Sinner is 24. Modern treatment, careful scheduling, and smart training can protect long careers. Both men have already shown an ability to learn from defeat and return stronger. Carlos also possesses something ranking points cannot measure. He knows he can hurt Sinner's game when healthy. He has survived match points, won 5-set battles, and beaten Jannik on the largest stages. Rehab cannot erase those memories. Sinner carries his own proof. He recovered from the agony of Paris and defeated Carlos at Wimbledon. That response showed mental strength, tactical growth, and courage. Neither player owns the other. That uncertainty is why the rivalry works. The next meeting, whenever it comes, will carry far more than a trophy. Everyone will watch Alcaraz's wrist on the forehand. They will study Sinner's movement and knee. A normal grimace will become breaking news. One medical timeout may set tennis social media on fire. Still, the first clean rally between them could silence every fear. Carlos might mix speed with touch. Jannik may answer through depth and timing. Within seconds, fans will remember why this matchup matters. Yet a comeback should not be judged only by whether Alcaraz defeats Sinner immediately. Months away from competition affect timing, endurance, and decision-making under pressure. Expecting him to return and instantly dominate the world #1 would be unfair, even by the internet's generous standards of total madness. Patience is essential. Carlos must rebuild match fitness, trust his wrist, and accept ugly wins if necessary. The flashy points can return later. His first job is staying on court. For Sinner, the challenge is different. He must manage his knee without treating Alcaraz's absence as a chance to overplay. A rivalry needs both men healthy. Winning the race because the other body failed would bring trophies, but it would leave the central sporting question unanswered. Perhaps that is what makes their bond so compelling. Each man needs the other. Sinner gives Alcaraz a level to chase. Carlos forces Jannik out of comfortable patterns. Their battles expose weaknesses, inspire changes, and prevent either champion from feeling safe. The cruel irony is obvious. The opponent who can make your career greater may also push your body and mind closer to the edge. Rivalry gives purpose, then sends an invoice. At 23, Alcaraz has already achieved more than most players manage in a lifetime. Still, his story with Jannik Sinner feels painfully fragile. They were ready to build an era together on the biggest stages. Injury placed that future on hold just as the contest reached its peak. No scandal is required, no secret feud is needed. The heartbreak is visible in the empty side of the draw, where Carlos's name should be waiting for Jannik's. If Alcaraz returns healthy, this rivalry can still become one of the greatest tennis has ever seen. If his wrist keeps failing him, Sinner may win the race without receiving the battles that were supposed to define it. That leaves us with the final question. Will Jannik's rise pull Carlos back toward greatness, or will Alcaraz spend his prime chasing the time injury stole from him? Like this video, subscribe for the next update, and drop your verdict in the comments right now. Is the Alcaraz-Sinner rivalry only beginning, or has its most heartbreaking chapter already changed everything?